Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us for today's UWC Virtual Visit Days. I'm your host, Marty Bennett, and today on our second Virtual Visit Days, we're going to be taking a look at some important questions that you have in your search for U.S. college or university choice that you may be looking at. And we're going to take some time in the next hour to go through the topics of need-based financial aid, the importance of essays in the admissions process, and then also what campus life is like, and particularly this fall with a new twist with everything that's been going on campus. With me today, we have three excellent speakers that have been recruiting internationally and recruiting specifically UWC students for several years. Sarah Schmidt at Macalester College, Carly Hernandez at Franklin and Marshall, and Beth Anne Spacht at University of Richmond. So we'll be turning it over to them in just a couple of minutes. Before we do, as we wait for the rest of the audience to jump in, and we're really looking forward to connecting with you today through this webinar and through the opportunities you'll have when we're done at about 1:25 Eastern Time US. We will be turning it over to the individual colleges. There will be a couple of ways you'll be able to get to the individual colleges, and I'll go through those at the end of the presentations. So thank you again for being a part of the event today. We had over 720 students register for the event before we started this afternoon, and we're looking forward to seeing hopefully many of you today at the webinar in the next hour, and then also in our individual college rooms. So for those of you who have questions about the United States as a destination for your studies, you have probably been thinking about the US for a number of months or years even. You may be from the US or have lived here at some point. But what we know that today is the world today is a very different place than it was a year ago. With everything that's been going on with the global pandemic, with the responses varying wildly in different countries as to how they have handled it or not handled it well. And there's a spectrum of where different countries are along that case. We're at a situation in the United States where we have largely not handled it very well as a country. And that's a challenge for us. And I know it's a concern that maybe either yourself or certainly your parents may have for you as considering the United States as a destination. But what I always look at, whether it's issues of health safety, issues of safety on college campuses in general, whether it's disagreements about policy. I've been fortunate enough to work in international education for over 27 years and have seen quite a lot of periods in that time where the US might not have been viewed very favorably from different countries in the world. Individual students might not have liked our government's policies or their rhetoric in a lot of cases, but yet they still valued what the US could bring to them and offer them in terms of their study opportunities, in terms of their career advancement, in terms of their cultural experiences that they could have while here. And I want to reassure you, as someone who's been in international education for so many years, and one who knows many of the people who you'll be meeting with after we're done with these presentations, is that the people that you're going to meet, the colleges that they represent, oftentimes are the antithesis of what the federal government might be presenting in terms of policy, in terms of health and security on campus, in terms of the values that they offer as institutions. And many of my colleagues, certainly myself, when I worked on a university campus after 9/11, we were especially protective of our students who were Muslim, students from the Middle East, because in the wider world, there was concerns that they weren't going to be treated well. And we made every effort, went the extra mile, in fact, to make sure that they were and made to feel welcome. And that's very much the case, I think you'll see with the college representatives you're going to be meeting with today, that you'll interact with, that the values that they have are the ones, particularly that the Davis Foundation holds dear, that the whole UWC movement is about, and that they are embodied on the college campuses that you're going to be visiting with today. So I wish you all the best of luck with the journey. I know it's a long and winding road to get where you need to be for your studies, and we're so grateful that you've made a commitment to be here today. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter today, Sarah Schmidt at Macalester College in Minnesota, and she's going to walk us through the intricacies of need-based financial aid and what you need to know. And if you have questions, please ask them in the question and answer section, and my colleagues will be able to answer those as we go. And if we have time after each presentation, I will answer those questions live with audio. So Sarah, please take it away.
Great, and thank you so much, Marty. Thank you all for joining us wherever you are in the world today. As mentioned, my name is Sarah Schmidt, and I am the Associate Director for International Admissions at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. So kind of echoing what Marty was already talking about, I know that especially around questions of financial aid and funding for international students for this upcoming year, there's a lot of uncertainty and concern about being able to access those resources, or if those resources are going to still be available for students. And I just want to start by saying that the pandemic is hitting universities and colleges in the United States and around the world in different ways. And so how different universities and colleges are managing that is going to vary by institution. However, I want to reassure you all that the colleges and universities that are here today as part of this program, as part of the fair, have made a dedicated promise and commitment to reaching out to and enrolling as well as funding international students. And so if anything, our commitment to you all is only strengthened by the challenges that we are seeing in the world today. I will acknowledge that this is a very complicated topic. And so my goal for this this presentation is to hopefully give you some building blocks to better understand some of the key terms and things to be thinking about in terms of applying for financial aid for US institutions. So we're going to start with some definitions of some common terms that you might come across as you're going through this process, and then talk a little bit about the different types of aid that might be available to you. And then finally, just a quick overview of some of the processes and forms in terms of applying for that aid. So part one, definitions. I think one of the first terms you'll come across is this idea of cost of attendance. And this is usually broken up into two categories. There's direct costs, and these are things that are being billed directly by your university or your college. And that includes things like tuition. If it's a residential program, that can include housing, dining options for students who are living on campus, as well as fees. And then there's also indirect costs. These are sometimes easy to forget as you're considering the cost of going to university, but they're still important to keep in mind. These are things that are not being billed directly by a university, but are still part of the cost. And so things like your personal expenses, how are you getting to that campus? How are you getting home if you're going to be traveling home for breaks? Things like buying your textbooks and supplies. And then if you're not living on campus, the costs that are associated with having an apartment and things like that. And then there's also, in the US especially, schools generally have a student health insurance requirement. And depending on how that's set up by the school, that can really depend on if it's being billed through the university or if it's going to be considered one of those indirect costs. The next set of definitions is this idea of sticker price versus net price. And what that really means is when you go to a university website and you're looking at our direct costs, tuition and fees, especially in the United States, it's a scary number, especially at private institutions like the one that I represent. Those sticker prices can be well over $65,000 US per year. But the truth of the matter is, in the United States, because we have this aid model, the majority of students tend to not actually pay that full sticker price. And so what you are comparing that with is something called net price, which, as you can see, is subtracting the financial aid you might be receiving from your cost of attendance. And here we have some data from the College Board that shows you that that can really be, in some cases, students are paying half or even less than what the sticker price is being promoted as. Another term you'll hear is demonstrated need. And so this is a calculation that is looking at the cost of attendance, which we've already defined. It's important to note that some schools might be considering just direct costs in their cost of attendance for this calculation. Other schools might also be factoring in some estimates for those indirect costs. And then based on your financial aid application, the financial aid office at that institution is going to calculate what is often called an expected family contribution, or you might hear it as an EFC. So this is something that is being calculated by the institution. It's not necessarily something that's being dictated by you, the student, or your family. And they're looking at a lot of different pieces of information to come up with that. Subtracting the expected family contribution from the cost of attendance is giving you that demonstrated need. So in this example, if the cost of attendance at a school is $70,000 US for the year, and your expected family contribution is $10,000 a year, that means that your demonstrated financial need for need-based financial aid is $60,000 per year. Finally, in the definitions, you have the difference between need blind and need aware. And this is a common question we'll get asked. And it's important to remember that this is an admissions question. Whether a school, an admissions office, is considering how much financial aid you need or not is something that is helping to decide if you're going to be offered admission. So in need blind, it means that the admissions decision does not include information about your financial need. They're not looking at your expected family contribution. They're not looking at any of that. They are just making their decision based on your application for admission. Need aware means that the admissions decision is including, as one of the many factors, how much financial need a student has. But it's important to remember that it's not the full question if you're only asking, do you offer need-based or do you offer need aware? Because the second question that's important is, do you meet 100% of that demonstrated financial need, or is that not guaranteed? Because there are certainly many universities and colleges in the US that may be need blind and will admit you, but they do not guarantee to meet your full financial demonstrated need. So it's important to ask both questions when you are talking with different schools. Different types of financial aid, they kind of fall into two categories. One is known as gift aid. So that's typically your grants and scholarships. And then also self-help aid, which usually falls into the category of loans, different financing options, as well as student or campus employment. Starting with gift aid. Gift aid basically is called a gift because this is money that is being gifted to you and you do not have any obligation to pay it back. Grant versus scholarships, you might hear that used interchangeably. It really doesn't matter whether it's called a grant or a scholarship, it accomplishes the same thing. You will find that there can be need-based grants, sometimes referred to as scholarships. That can be coming from the institution, or if you have, if applicable, potentially a Davis Foundation grant. And then for US citizens or permanent residents, that could also be in the form of federal grants or state grants. Non-need-based scholarships, that's typically what you would refer to as merit-based scholarships. So it has nothing to do with your family's financial picture. It might be something that the school is awarding based on your grades, or maybe a special talent in music or in the arts. And there's also potential for merit-based scholarships that are coming from the college and the university themselves, or there might be outside resources that you can access. When it comes to loans, again, this is where citizenship might have a difference. So US citizens and permanent residents, well, if you have financial need, will potentially be offered a federal loan. They come in subsidized or unsubsidized. Subsidized loans just means that the interest on that loan amount is not accruing while you are a student at that university or that college. Some schools for international students may not package loans. Other schools might, and that might be taking the form of institutional loans to help fill out their financial aid package. But there's also private loan options for US citizens and permanent residents as well. And then finally, student employment. This is something that can be offered to either US citizens or international students. There's different places that funding might be coming from, but it really comes down to basically a paycheck that you would be earning. The important thing to remember about student employment is typically in a financial aid letter, the school will show you the maximum amount that you could earn for that year, but you have to earn it. It's not like a scholarship that you can apply the entire balance at once and then slowly work your way. You have to earn it as you go through the year. And then finally, applying. This is where it can get really tricky because there is really no centralized way of doing anything in the United States. Our individualism is one of the benefits because there are so many great options, but it also can be frustrating when you are going through applying because it means there are all these different deadlines, different schools are looking for different things. But in general, things to keep in mind, you're usually going to be applying for financial aid at the same time that you're applying for admission. As I mentioned, each college and university tends to have their own deadline, so it's important to make sure that you're keeping track of that. And then if you're looking for outside scholarships from different agencies, they can also have widely different deadlines as well as application processes. And then in terms of how to apply, again, every school is going to have its own recipe, if you will, but there are some common ingredients that you might come across. For US citizens and permanent residents, usually the first form you'll be asked to fill out is the FAFSA. This is a form that's used for allocating federally available financial aid, which is why it's something that's only available to US citizens and permanent residents. This is not something that students who would be studying on an F1 visa would be accessing. The CSS Profile is something that is used more to figure out institutional aid. And so this becomes one of the common financial aid forms for international students that you'll be asked to submit. Depending on the institution, as a US citizen, you might also be asked to fill out the CSS Profile in addition to the FAFSA. There's about 300 colleges and universities in the US that do require this. It's a bit more in depth than the FAFSA, and there's also a fee associated with applying, but you'll note that there could be options. So if the fee is a problem, you can reach out to the school, ask if they provide a waiver, or ask if they have an alternative international financial aid application. One of the more common ones you'll find is the ISFA, the International Student Financial Aid Application, which is free to file, or some institutions might actually have their own international financial aid application, and that would usually be found directly on their website. Other things you might be asked for, a certification of finances. This is applicable directly for international students. Not all schools ask for this form up front. It's technically an immigration form, but there are schools, for example, like Macalester, that like to have that information all at once. The one thing I'll note is whenever you are at the point of filling out a certification of finances as UWC students, please do not include your Davis grant on that form, because it's technically something between the Davis Foundation and the university or college Davis partner, not yours. And so in the very least, it's something where it could delay your process because the school will catch it and ask you for a new certification of finances. Worst case scenario, the school is going to think that your family has an additional $25,000 or $10,000 a year to contribute towards your education. Depending on your situation, you might be asked for tax returns, or if tax returns aren't something that are available in your country, maybe bank statements, and then there could be other information as well. And then finally, I'll just leave it with, there are lots of resources, but in general, we know that this is a complicated process on top of the process of applying for admissions in the United States. So please make use of resources like individual college and university websites. Third-party websites can sometimes be out of date or have erroneous information. And so going straight to that university or college's financial aid website is usually best practice. Your university counselor at your UWC campus, they've been helping UWC students go through this process and can be very knowledgeable. And then finally, the admissions counselors who are here today, our colleagues in financial aid, we want to help you. We don't want you to wait until you're at the end of the process and trying to make the sense of things before you reach out to us. Reach out now. We are more than happy to talk through our individual processes. So thank you. I'm going to leave it there. And if you have some questions, I'll do my best to answer them in the chat, or you're welcome to drop by during the fair. But I'm going to now turn it over to, I believe, Carly to talk about the essays.
And before we jump to Carly, I just want to give a special shout out to Carly. Thank you, Sarah. Carly is someone who is in a very unique situation. She went into labor early last week and had her first child. Mama and baby are doing well, and less than a week after having her child, she's now here presenting to you this afternoon. So truly an inspiration, Carly, and really remarkable. Way to go, Superwoman. And to take it away and let us know what you have to say about the importance of essays.
Thank you, Marty. This is one of my favorite topics to cover when doing some of these specific workshops or webinars, and I am doing more webinars. In fact, I'm doing a partnership with Macalester to do some upcoming general topics, not specific to either of our schools, but just good college advice for the application, following up, writing the essay, doing interviews. The schedule for those is posted on Franklin and Marshall's website, and we certainly are compelled to offer this information. The reason that I'm here is because I have been in admission for 10 years and feel so strongly about following through with contacting students during what I know is an incredibly busy or stressful time of year, and also a really unprecedented year when things are changing, application requirements are changing. A lot of schools have gone test optional that weren't before. Deadlines may even be changing. They did in the spring for the last class to enroll. And we as college representatives want to be incredibly flexible, helpful, understanding with students that are dealing with really, really unusual circumstances, unique even to any previous year when we already were schools that strove to meet students halfway when they were dealing with something like lack of connectivity to the internet or not being able to get to a test center. That said, I'm going to jump into chatting about the college essay. As I said, my favorite topic. I was a creative writing major when I attended F&M myself. It's also something I would highlight as being particularly important this year, especially for smaller and highly selective schools. Those that admit 35 or fewer % of their applicants are going to look very carefully at the essay. Schools that are smaller, liberal arts colleges, those tend to put a little bit more emphasis on the essay. And the reason that I say it's especially relevant is because this year, with not submitting test scores in a lot of cases, because students, even if they would have chosen to, are not opting to submit testing because they couldn't take more than one sitting or they couldn't take any at all, we are going to have to really consider the metrics and the materials that we do have. And so the essay and things like an interview or an option interview are going to be especially important to us. The first question students might have, especially if you're someone who's very technically minded, is going to be, why do we require a piece of writing to evaluate how you're going to do in our college coursework? And also, how is it being evaluated? How is your writing being considered around the committee table? And again, especially at some of the smaller or highly selective or liberal arts colleges that you're chatting with, there is going to be a committee process where a representative of your area of the world, maybe your country, maybe your city, is going to distill all of the aspects of your application, having read it very thoroughly once or maybe even twice, for the rest of the group. And it's going to come to a discussion for several minutes where your application is likely to be the only one on the table for that consideration. There are two major reasons we require the essay. One is because we want to know about your personality, about your fit, which you'll hear a lot, that word a lot, in our specific institution. And fit is important at relatively selective schools because it's certainly a fact that very qualified, very intelligent international students taking rigorous curriculums can still find themselves on the wait list of some very selective schools. And it's never about something personal. It's not about the curriculum. The IB curriculum, the UWC students, in my opinion, is one of the most challenging fitting in the world to come to an institution like ours, like Macalester. There's also an aspect of what kind of character is this person going to be on our small, highly engaged campus. That really matters. And that's that second layer of evaluation that we're doing in the committee roundtable. Obviously, we're also looking at writing strength, and that's very relevant to college because yes, the essay isn't something that you're sitting down to do like in the SAT sitting scenario. It's going to be something that you can really reflect on and consider and edit, and that is actually more relevant to college writing than the test sitting scenario. Being able to write in an informal but academic way. The personal essay is not like a chemistry paper. It should not read like an academic paper because it is a type of writing that requires a comfort level with talking about yourself, reflecting, analyzing, a little bit of storytelling. And so that's very different than something highly technical. And in a sense, many students, particularly international students, might say that that's actually harder. It's easier to be highly technical and textbook. It's harder to weave something anecdotal and personal and engaging. And so the essay is going to tell us that writing level, that comfort level that student has with the kind of writing assignments they're going to be taking in college. The personalness of the personal essay is going to be very current. Your grades, a lot of your achievements, your extracurriculars that you've done for all of high school, those are going to be the cumulative effort of a couple of years. The essay is something that regardless of how your first year of high school or your first year transitioning to the UWC went, regardless of what your GPA is, it's a reflection of who you are right now, this month, the last month that you were working on the essay. Very, very current. You can reflect your personality, including your humor, in the essay in a way that you wouldn't necessarily assume. A lot of colleges meet students who come into interview settings or essay writing settings very formally because they imagine that this is going to be a bit like a job interview. And perhaps in their home country, especially outside the US, I see students who have been prepared for that kind of setting to act very maturely, to be very formal, and the personal essay is the opposite of that. It's meant for you to be your very genuine self, your teenage, coming of age, still evaluating what your opinions are self. And that's actually something that's very appealing, is to know that you're really talking to this real person on the other side of this piece of paper. And if you are a humorous person, you can even inject some of that humor rather than feeling that you have to act like you're expected. You have to be very rigid. You have to be very blazer with elbow patches. That's a common pitfall. And so I would encourage you to share your genuine personality in your writing. Again, the fit for the college or university can be a bit about your personality and a bit about your topic of choice, because if you're writing about something that's very meaningful to you or was very impactful on your growth and development, then that's going to lend some additional meaning to that interpretation. And it's also going to share a bit of your history in many cases, depending on the topic that you choose. And that's going to tell colleges and universities really who you are and what anecdotal information you want to share about yourself that you feel is the most telling about your personality. Now, as I said, this is non-academic writing, which is a bit of a challenge for many students, especially if English is a second language that you only started in high school or later. It's going to show your directive following skills, because we all know that even though the essay is a little bit free form and interpretive and you can be creative with it, you are also meeting a request, and that is the prompt or the question that the essay is answering. So you also must demonstrate that you can follow that instruction or that directive. And that writing ability, particularly in the smaller schools like F&M, we don't overemphasize testing, which is why we don't at the outset with the standardized testing for admission. But even once you're a student, your final grade is not actually going to be 80 or 100% determined by a midterm and a final. It's going to be more like 25% on a midterm or a final. We de-emphasize those high stress single sitting experiences and look much more towards regular critical thinking. Papers might only be a page or two long and they may be due every week. And so your essay writing ability is going to be very, very cognate to that. We've also found through a pilot study on our own campus, this was about 15 or even 20 years ago, but is still relevant today, that students who have a strong writing ability and strong GPA have the highest correlation with a strong college GPA at the end of their first year. There's much less of a correlation with what their testing is with what their college GPA is. And so your writing ability is going to share more than you think about how you may succeed and thrive in your first year of college with those regular assignments making up the bulk of what your grade is. Now, as I've said, there are different levels of importance of the essay to different schools. So I've emphasized quite a bit that smaller and selective and holistic and liberal arts college admission processes are going to weigh these a little bit more heavily. It may not be quite as true for schools that are evaluating 40,000 applications to put so much weight on the essay, and specialized programs. Also, like if you're going into engineering, they may not emphasize the essay as much as I am mentioning that we are. But for international students, so many of them come with highly competitive credentials, global experience, they speak 4 languages, they've taken the IB or another really rigorous curriculum that's actually more difficult than what the domestic students are doing in the US. There is a number of those students who, while academically qualified, may find themselves on that wait list, but those non-metric qualities, good interviews, great essay, qualities of character that come through in the extracurriculars, those softer aspects of the application, those are the things that can, if academics are considered first, can move the needle between a student who is simply qualified by the numbers to attend an institution versus who an institution really falls in love with. And that's the kind of student that they are more likely to give a significant amount of financial aid to if that's required, because as Sarah mentioned in the financial aid presentation prior, many of these applications are going to be read need aware. So at like 98 or 99% of the colleges in the US, we are going to evaluate your application with a basic idea of whether you are a low or mid or high needs student. And it typically is more competitive in the highest tiers of aid awards that the institutions themselves are funding, not alone, but gift aid. It is going to be competitive to stand out. And so some of these soft factors really will be a bit of a tiebreaker or a needle mover for those of you that are right on that mark. We'll also ask ourselves in committee, has the student followed these directions, shared a value, a learned experience, or a moment of change? That reflection should have a beginning, a middle, and end. The way they've structured the essay, like having a thesis, is going to show us that moment of transition. Have they composed that well and told us about something that they learned? Regardless of which prompt you choose, these 3 delineations are going to be part of that question, regardless of exactly which prompt it is. Have they engaged the reader thinking that this is going to be someone who is going to be a wonderful community member? Are they going to be a community changer when they arrive here? Going to be someone who takes advantage of everything that we have to offer? Because of course, that's exactly what we want. I'll just share 3 quick ideas for how you can brainstorm on writing an essay. You've very likely already started. But I would also say, don't be married to the first idea that occurs to you, or think that there's only one story that you may end up telling. If you feel that it's not the right story to tell in the length of time that you have, or for a college admission essay with who's going to be reading it, you should have the freedom to change essay topics even if you've already started out on a different one, if you know that that one may serve you better. I'll also share this presentation. If anyone is interested in chatting us, I can give you these ideas to help you along, a few do's and don'ts about being very genuine in your writing, about not feeling like you need to come up with an earth-shattering or life-saving story. It could be something very everyday for you that just tells us a lot about you. One of the best essays I've ever read in 10 years of working in admission was actually about learning how to drive. And that's something that most all of us will go through. But the student who wrote this for their application essay wrote about it in a way that was really humble, very humorous, and it took place in Mumbai, India. And so it was a wonderful juxtaposition of the chaoticness of painting what the world looked like and how stressful and frightening it was to learn to drive. It was very relatable because everyone has been there in that moment when they're doing something they don't know how to do yet. And it was someone who impressed upon me that they would be a wonderful colleague, a wonderful community member, someone who was really down to earth and had a great storytelling style of writing. So you don't have to write about something that is a really out of this world experience. It could be something that is just part of coming of age. Again, I'll share some of these because I don't want to go over time. If you are interested in having some of these do's and don'ts or brainstorming exercise, again, it's one of my favorite topics to go over, and I'd be happy to speak one-on-one with students or share some of the presentation materials. All right, at this point, I think I have to hand over the presentation to our next topic. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, Carly. And Beth Anne Spacht from University of Richmond is up next, and she's going to be walking us through our last topic of the day. She's going to be talking about U.S. campus life, what to expect. And before Beth Anne gets into her presentation, I just wanted to give an example of what we're talking about earlier at the top about how our individual campuses are responding to COVID-19 in our own communities. Beth Anne was sharing with me before the presentations began that Richmond has yet to have a case of coronavirus on their campus so far, knock on wood, and everything else. So Beth Anne, if you would like to take us into this, what campus life is like now on college campuses in the United States, please take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marty. And again, I just want to echo what the presenters before me have said with your thanks for really joining us today. And I've been trying to keep up with all the really great questions that you've been submitting in the Q&A. I'm excited to connect with many of you after the fact here. But the presentation that I have for you today is going to be a little bit more general. And what I'm hoping you really take away from it are just some questions that you can start asking yourself, some key considerations to keep in mind as you start preparing for these next steps. So hopefully you can use this as a starting point to really shape and craft your individual game plan on the things you need to be considering when adjusting into a new environment. And I'm going to try to advance the slide here. All right, but before we get there, I do want to just kind of address what we would call the elephant in the room, or maybe the very obvious question that has been on everyone's mind right now, which is how has the U.S. campus life experience changed, or for how long will we feel the impact of coronavirus in the way that we operate in a day-to-day existence? And the reality is I don't have a great blanket answer for you on that. Every university is handling the scenario very differently, but I think one of the more universal challenges that we're facing at this point is that really one of the key iconic items of the U.S. college experience is that residential aspect where we really value community building and togetherness. And so we as campus communities have been very challenged right now to be creative and supportive in still staying true to that culture of community, even if we physically can't be in the same space. So while I don't have the magic answer to what this might look like when you might begin your university experience, I am very optimistic that through these conversations we're having about what it means to be accountable community members and really keep adaptability and flexibility top of mind, you're going to still have a very robust and present experience. And that really leads me to the conversation around attitude. Attitude really does matter when you're adjusting to a new setting. We really encourage you to keep positivity and a good sense of adventure, and also recognize that the adjustment process is typically not going to be something immediate. So you want to give yourself the time and the mental space to prepare for what's ahead, but also really challenge yourself to take advantage of moments that will bring you outside of your comfort zone, because as I have in the slide here, that really is where the magic happens. And that's where some of the best experiences that you'll encounter really come from. So I'll get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty here of what I would say it constitutes your pre-departure checklist. So I have 4 categories of consideration outlined here, but I do want to emphasize that this is not something you need to be worrying about right now. This is typically after you have chosen a university home, you're preparing over the summer months for August arrival, and there's typically also going to be an office or a peer or professional advisor who is guiding you through some of these considerations. So we're not just going to drop you alone and say, figure it out. But there are a few things that you can start really researching and getting prepared for now. One of the main items is arrival and travel documentation. Sometimes it requires more time than you think to get these pieces together. We definitely found that to be true this summer as we worked through the ebbs and flows of visa restrictions and embassy closures and issuing and reissuing I-20 documents. But my best piece of advice is, as soon as you have access to do it, you want to set up your university email address and really get in the habit of checking that email daily. The reason why is because we will be constantly communicating with you over the summer months with important information about securing visa appointments and preparing for that arrival process. So getting in the habit of doing that early and often will definitely prepare you. Also keep in mind the items that you are going to need for self-care and health. Keep those good habits present. So things like making sure you're prepared with any medications you might need, especially in that first month. Thinking through considerations of what climate you're going to be entering into. Are you going to need to be prepared to bring a winter coat, or is the climate going to be a little bit hotter? And then lastly, I know it's hard to plan for an emergency, but it's a good idea to have a general conversation and game plan around the question of, if I had to suddenly go home unexpectedly, how would that work? What strategies or what resources would I be able to have access to and provide for? And that really ties into the conversations you want to have and the thought process you want to put into how you're going to function in the financial world so that you can plan out your budget and your approach. A really good practice would be to think through what your immediate needs are going to be when you first arrive in the country and when you first arrive on the campus. Sarah gave a great breakdown of that conversation of indirect costs. So some, but not all universities are going to incorporate financial support for some of these items, like getting towels and sheets and books and transportation into their aid packages, but not every university will. And even those that do, there may be a waiting period before you can access those funds. So you do want to be prepared for some out-of-pocket expenses as you approach this new environment, and really make sure that you are budgeting appropriately to be able to be successful and thrive in especially those first few weeks and months. It is also a great way to combat homesickness, to really stay connected. So make sure that people know how to reach you. Something you can even start doing now is asking your university advisors, is there a UWC student from my UWC who has gone to this campus? Is that someone I can get connected to and start building a relationship with? Another great way to start getting a pulse on what day-to-day life looks like at the universities that you're considering and ultimately might make your college home. If you have access to social media, start following the central channels of those universities. And that can really give you not only a good understanding of what buildings look like, what they're called, terminology that might be used on that campus, a really good overview of traditions, or simply what a day-to-day life might look like as a student there. And just getting that visual familiarity can really help you to have a good sense of place and an understanding of what you can expect in those next steps. So last thing to do in the kind of pre-departure stage is just spend a little bit of time doing some self-reflection and taking stock on your attitudes and your values. Again, we want your university in the US, and one of the reasons we're here actively presently trying to recruit Davis students is because we value the presence that you bring on our campus communities, and we want you to feel at home there. So is there a particular item or a song or something that can really give you that sense of comfort in a new setting? Also, set a few goals for yourself that you might want to achieve in your first few weeks or months on campus. Really think about what you want to get out of the experience. Universities are an awesome time to try new things, make some mistakes, take some measured risks. You'll be managing your own time, and you'll really want to be prepared again to go outside of your comfort zone and challenge yourself to take initiative. And so setting some goals can really help to guide you on that pathway. It's also a very good idea to spend some time studying up on the college or the region's culture. What are some of the current events that are impacting where your college is located? What are some of the inequities that are driving national conversation right now? Right now, for example, the US is in an election year. If you come on our college campuses, you're going to be hearing a lot of discussion around politics. We're also having some really difficult conversations on some of the challenges we're facing around issues of privilege and race and policing. And so really keeping in mind what the current events are can help you to participate in those conversations. You might be surprised at how open some of those conversations can be on a college campus, but our professors are probably going to bring it into the classroom to a degree, and those classroom discussions can really filter into the out-of-class experience as well. So the last thing that you'll want to do is really just think again, what are your personal values and what are your boundaries too? What we don't want you to feel like you have to do when you come to our campuses is change everything about yourself to fit into our culture. That would be very contrary to the purpose of why we want you here and why we value your presence. So take note of the things that bring you personal joy, that you really care to stay true to. So while college is a time of growth and independence, you don't want to lose sight of those personal values either. So after arrival, what can you expect? First and foremost, there's typically going to be a time period that is dedicated either to first year orientation or even specific to international orientation, where you have a little bit of time, space, and freedom to explore, make mistakes, ask questions, and find your resources as well. So be present, attend everything that is being asked of you, and also don't be afraid if you're unfamiliar with the terminology or an office. We have so many different resources available at each of our institutions, and sometimes the challenge is really just figuring out what they're called as an office and how that relates to what they do on our campuses. So use your peer advisors, turn to your professors, make sure that you're asking those questions. And even if it feels uncomfortable to be the one who's constantly asking, rest assured everyone else probably has the same question too. You will also want to make sure that you are familiarizing yourself and adhering to some of the rules and regulations that might be driving how you operate in the campus setting. So be prepared for some differences, such as differences in drinking age and attitudes around alcohol on a college campus. In the US, the drinking age is often 21, and that is different than many cultures. You are going to find that there are restrictions on how many hours you might be able to have a campus job based on your visa status. So making sure that you are having these considerations, and not only university rules, but state and national rules as well, so that you are operating appropriately within this context. Another great way to really make that university a home is just to get involved. Now, unlike in your high school experience where you might have certain requirements for extracurricular involvement, or you're doing it to kind of shape your college application process, we're really going to invite you to take initiative and ownership over the types of things that you want to get involved in and where you want to dedicate your time. So this will be a little bit of proactivity, and oftentimes it's common to hear universities saying some kind of statistic along the lines of, we have over 200 different clubs, organizations, and areas of involvement. So it's not often a matter of a lack of things going on. It's a matter of you figuring out which of those things you really want to take the time to dedicate to. And then what to expect. Now, one thing that I think I want to emphasize to you is that adjustment is not a linear process. There are going to be high points and there are going to be low points. And one thing that you can expect and be prepared for is that, unlike when you arrived at your UWC, where almost everyone was coming from different countries and nationalities, and the orientation to campus was a little bit more tuned into some of the unique considerations that you may have had top of mind, the reality is that when you come to our campuses, you are probably going to be in the minority in that most of the other students are already in the United States. And in many cases, this is also the first time that many of those students have ever left home. So in many ways, you already have a leg up on this experience. You've made that leap into a residential campus life by nature of going to UWC. And there may be times where you feel that difference compared to your peers, sometimes in elements of maturity or approach to independence and independent living for the first time. It also means, again, that you might have some different questions than your peers, and that's okay. So just recognize, again, that adaptation is not a linear process. Adaptation, I should say, is not a linear process, but there are some tips and tricks that can make it go a little bit more smoothly. Now, I'm not going to read each of these to you, but I do want to really emphasize that element of time management. Time operates differently in a university where you might be in class 15 to 20 hours per week, which means you have a lot more autonomy over how you want to structure your day and how you want to engage. So it is important to get involved, but also to have a good sense of balance. And sometimes that means saying no to opportunities just as often as you're saying yes. So as you go through those first weeks and months and even that first year, really recognize your boundaries and how you're spending in your time is impacting your emotional and your stress levels so that you can really structure your days accordingly. It's also a great idea to build those relationships, not only with your peers. We encourage you to not just hang out with the other international students on campus or just those who speak your language. We want you to really be saying hello to a new person every single day. But you also want to recognize that there is definitely a culture of support among, especially at Davis Partner Schools, the professors that you'll have access to. Oftentimes they'll have established what we would call office hours, which are free periods where you can come in, chat, approach them with any concerns you have, and really get to know them. And so you want to take advantage of those opportunities, not only to build your network, but also because professors might be able to enable opportunities for you that you hope to take advantage of down the road, like internships or research. So start building those connections and do it early and often, and you'll find that it yields some really great results. And then after you've been on campus for about a month, let's say that late September, October timeframe, just take a moment and pause, take a deep breath and reflect on how things are going. So I have a few guiding questions that you can ask yourself here, but really take stock of items like, how are you working towards those goals that you set for yourself before you left? Are your friendships feeling healthy and productive? Is your approach to your academic coursework working for you? Is the time of day that you selected to take classes positive, or maybe do you want to make a change in the next semester? So I can't emphasize enough that while it seems like 4 years is a short amount of time, it is actually quite a substantial amount of time to be able to really explore all different avenues of the university experience, take advantage of everything that we have available to you, and you don't have to do it right away. So be kind to yourself, be gracious with yourself, and recognize that it is a 4-year experience. So I just wanted to leave you with a few final words from our students. I like that third bullet down. Be yourself and remember that everyone is just as nervous as you are. I think that's a really nice reassurance. And again, just want to finally echo how much we value your presence in our communities, and cannot wait to be able to connect with you in the college fair setting. Be sure you're asking each school that you're interested in some of these questions about how they've been treating students in times of COVID, and that can really give you a great indicator of how you'll be treated in your new university home as well. And I'll end there and pass it back to Marty at this time.
Many thanks, Beth Anne. Wonderful presentation, both from you, Carly, and Sarah. All tremendous presentations today. And we're getting a lot of fantastic questions in the Q&A. We won't be able to get to all of them now. I know Beth Anne and Sarah and Carly have been answering many of your questions. If we don't get to them, certainly save those questions that you have for some of the college representatives you're going to be meeting with over the next few minutes after we're done here. And we're going to take a quick break as we're allowing Beth Anne, Carly, and Sarah to leave the room now to get into their own meeting rooms so that they're ready for you. So thank you again to Beth Anne, Carly, and Sarah. Did a wonderful job there. We're going to shift gears just a second here and get to what we're talking about next, which will be where are you going to go from here? So let's quickly stop what we're doing now with the presentation, and we're going to go quickly to share what's going on next with the college fair portion of the afternoon. So for those of you who are familiar with UWC, we created and these events, the virtual visit day events, we've got up on our screen now. This is the landing page for the event, and I'll be dropping the link to this in the chat shortly after we, right before we release you to go to meet with the individual college representatives. So we'll be putting that information in, actually I'll put it into the chat here in just a moment as we get ready to make the transition. Now, just so you see, all this this page has on the left-hand side, it has all the names of the individual colleges. And hopefully, if you have, if your guidance counselors have given you this web page previously, you already have it bookmarked. But what this page does is the links, the college names, when you get to this page, will take you directly to the meeting rooms for the individual colleges that you would like to visit. Now, the other potentially two other links that you'll see on each line. The second one is the institutional website for each college. And the third one is either a link to an email address if you would like to schedule an interview. Now, these interview scheduling links are not going to happen in the next 2 hours. They're going to happen at times after the event is done this afternoon here in the United States. So, but that is a great way, if you haven't already scheduled an interview for the colleges that you wish to visit today, certainly make sure you take advantage of that link. There are over 3/4 of the 48 institutions, I think we're at 37 of the 48, do have these links available to you, so you can schedule an interview. And again, these interviews are primarily reserved for seniors. Those are in their IB2 year. So that please let those seniors, if you're a first-year IB student, please let the seniors get those spots. But each institution that has those links has opportunities for you to interview at this stage. Will have the link that you're welcome to check into. And I'm about to post the link to this landing page if you don't already have it in the chat. So you'll have that in a moment. And then also, what I would recommend is when you get to that page, bookmark it, because any link that you click on to visit a university's Zoom room, if you click on Bard or Bates or Bennington, whichever one, it will open up a new window for you. So this page should stay open, this landing page should stay open wherever you are, either on a phone, tablet, or laptop, or desktop, wherever you are. But do come back to it as you look to go to visit each of the other colleges and universities. So I'm going to drop in the link to the landing page in the comments section, on the chat section. And as soon as I close this webinar, you'll be redirected to this landing page automatically. So if you don't have time to click on the link now, you will get that, be sent there automatically when I close this webinar in just a couple of minutes. Now, one thing I will say is you're obviously not going to have time to visit all 48 schools. So if you have opportunities and you're a senior and you'd like to schedule an interview, do take advantage of that. The landing page will remain open for several days, if not weeks. So you're welcome to come back to it and register for, sign up for an interview with some of the college representatives. So for now, we're gonna end the webinar now. We're gonna send you to the landing page and invite you to go visit the individual colleges. I will let you know, recording of this will be available on our YouTube channel, and we'll drop a link to all of you today at the end of the day when that is up and loaded. And we'll also have the presentations in PDF format that you've just seen today. A number of students have been requesting them. We're gonna send those to your counselors, and then your counselors, if you would like to request them from them, can forward them on to you. So thanks very much for attending today. We really hope you got a lot out of the great sessions, and we look forward to the great conversations you're about to have with the colleges and universities. So until next time, have a wonderful day.